Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks so much for tuning in. For today's video, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at this incredibly clean 1992 Ford Mustang GT. In this review, I'm going to start it up, show the engine, get an exhaust clip, and go over the performance data. Of course, I'll take it on a thorough drive and show you many of the unique aspects throughout the interior as well as exterior. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and hop on in, start her up, and let her run. Also, a huge thanks to my friends at Cosmo Motors of Hickory, North Carolina for providing this example today. For more information about the dealership, including contact info and current inventory, please feel free to check out their website provided in the description box below. The third generation Mustang was always a car that I wanted to drive, but never really had the chance to do so. With this channel, I've been fortunate to experience cars ranging from 60-year-old classics to million-dollar supercars. However, I've always had a short list of seemingly random bucket list cars that I hope to drive at some point in my life. I'm sure many of you have the same thing, whether it be established out of pure curiosity or the insatiable desire to drive one of your childhood dream cars. One thing's for sure, it's incredibly satisfying when you're finally able to cross one of those off the list. I've always had a soft spot for these cars. By the time I was born, they already had been on the market for a decade. Commonly referred to as Fox bodies, as they run on Ford's rear-wheel drive Fox platform, the third generation Mustangs enjoyed an incredibly long production run that spanned between 1979 and 1993. They were far from perfect, but their quirks are what made them iconic. Not only that, but the high-output V8 engines of the late 80s played a major role in revitalizing what it meant to be a muscle car. Over the years, Ford had continuously experimented with different ways to make the Mustang even better. At the end of the day, a small block V8 was the heart and soul of this car. In 1987, the Mustang was treated to a thorough refreshing that introduced new styling elements, improved aerodynamics, greater performance across the board, and even some suspension tweaks to sharpen handling. The basic shape of the car remained, but the car was much sleeker than before. The LX had a drag coefficient of 0.36, while the GT was a tad higher at 0.38. A new ground effects package was included as standard equipment on the GT. It featured a large rear wing, rocker panel moldings, and a front chin spoiler with round fog lamps. At the outer edges of the front fascia and rocker panel moldings, there's functional air channels. They don't really serve a purpose aside from just looking cool, but at least they're sort of functional. The flush-mounted headlamps, inboard triangular parking lamps, and wraparound turn signals were part of the refresh and shared between all late-model Fox bodies. Only the GT had the louvered tail lamps. Ford also ditched the vertical C-pillar louvers found in the hatchback and coupe in '87 in favor of a larger piece of glass with the word Mustang embedded at the bottom. Despite having more glass, the opening didn't change, preserving the same rearward visibility of years prior. Because of its small size, the Fox body is really easy to see out of. Aside from the ground effects kit, the GT also differed from the LX by not having a grille, similar I guess to the SVO. Its primary intake was located in the lower fascia. In 1992, the GT was offered in two body styles, hatchback and convertible. Pricing began at $15,243 and $20,199 respectively. The V8-powered LX Coupe was the value leader of the lineup with a starting price of $13,422. The primary difference with opting for the GT really was whether you wanted the ground effects kit, as a V8-powered LX came with the GT suspension tuning and a similar level of standard equipment, only with more understated styling and a bit less weight. The third generation Mustang, specifically the 1987 and newer models, were and still are an incredible performance bargain. That is, if you're lucky enough to find one still in good shape. These 16 by 7 inch 5-spoke cast aluminum wheels were only offered on the GT and V8 equipped LX models. They're wrapped in 225/55 tires. One thing that kind of took me by surprise was how well this particular car drove. With incredibly low miles, it was almost like traveling back in time. Fox bodies were fairly lightweight cars too. This particular example had a curb weight of around 3,100 pounds. Without the ground effects kit, LX models weighed about 100 pounds less than a comparable GT, give or take some depending on the body style. In fact, a V8 LX coupe only weighed about 2,800 pounds. This, plus the fact that you only have a wheelbase that stretches 100.5 inches, makes this car very easy to maneuver. The steering is firm with an appreciable amount of road feel to keep things engaging. It's a powered rack and pinion design that features a relatively quick 15:1 ratio. These cars were never built to handle corners with precision and finesse, an inherent limitation of the live axle out back, but they can certainly handle their own, especially the V8 models, which came standard with Ford's traction lock rear differential. The lack of an adjustable steering column took some time to get used to, but I don't imagine most folks will find an issue with this. One weak point though for all Fox bodies are the factory brakes. In 1992, the GT featured 10.8-inch internally ventilated discs up front and 9-inch drums in the rear. They're perfectly adequate for cruising around and perhaps some light-spirited driving, but with sub-160-foot stopping distances from 60 miles an hour, they're by no means focused towards performance. I would suggest upgrading the brakes to a more substantial setup if you plan on participating in competitive events on the regular. Going back to handling for a moment, V8 Fox bodies benefited from additional suspension tuning to better match their performance potential. Unique features included progressive rate springs and gas pressurized shocks front and rear. All Mustangs at the time featured a front stabilizer bar, but the V8 models had a larger one. The rear also benefited from Ford's Quadra-Shock setup, which added a rear stabilizer bar and two gas-filled horizontally mounted axle dampers to improve stability and help mitigate body roll. I will say the GT's ride quality is so smooth that it's borderline supple. It can feel a bit floaty over pronounced undulations in the road, but overall it's well controlled and easily managed. In 1992, the Mustang was offered with either a 2.3-liter 4-cylinder or a 5-liter V8. While the more economical choice, the 4-cylinder only made 105 horsepower and 135 pound-feet of torque. The V8 was what made this generation of Mustangs so memorable. It was offered as an option on the LX and came standard on the GT. With 225 horsepower at 4,000 RPM and 300 pound-feet of torque at 3,200 RPM, the 5.0, which actually displaced closer to 4.9 liters, could hit 60 miles an hour in the low 6-second range with the manual transmission. When looking at what a Mustang is capable of nowadays, you might be wondering what all of the fuss was about. Back in the day, these Fox bodies were nothing to scoff at. Ford revamped this engine as part of the 1987 redesign. Horsepower and torque both saw increases thanks to freer flowing cylinder heads, a forged steel crankshaft, low friction roller tappets, forged aluminum pistons, stainless steel tubular headers, a large diameter dual exhaust system, and more. Considering that the first V8 Fox body was pushing 140 horsepower from a carbureted V8, you can begin to understand how significant this was for the time, especially with steep competition from Chevrolet and Pontiac. This engine continued in the 4th generation, or SN95 Mustangs, up until 1996. The 4.6-liter engine that replaced it matched the output of the 5.0 in 1993 with a more modern single overhead cam design that improved NVH levels while retaining a lot of its predecessor's character. That being said, the 5.0 was a beast of an engine. It feels faster than it really is thanks to a wealth of torque, an incredible sounding exhaust, and a standard 5-speed manual transmission. With the traction lock differential, the GT had a 2.73-to-1 final drive. A 3.08-to-1 final drive was optional. Another cool thing about these cars is that they're a wonderful platform for budget-minded performance upgrades that can dramatically change how the car puts its power to the ground. The transmission in the car that I drove was paired to a Stata short-throw shifter, which offered a lot of feel and crisp engagement in addition to the firm clutch pedal. I especially liked how the shifter angles towards the driver, which made it a bit easier to reach. Compared to the SN95, these cars are undeniably old school, built around older technology but continuously updated along the way. They're incredibly analog and require your full attention, as there's no ABS, no traction control, and no stability control. Of course, if you prefer the car to do some work itself, Ford also offered a 4-speed automatic overdrive transmission. The exhaust system was one of my favorite things about this car. It sounded amazing. I believe it to be the stock setup, true duals from the headers back. It's throaty and aggressive, even more so than the SN95 Mustangs. With the GT's lower rear fascia, the pipes turned down. The LX had long chrome pipes that were a lot more noticeable. The 5.0 features an iron block with iron heads and 2 pushrod operated overhead valves per cylinder. Fuel is delivered via sequential multi-port injection with a compression ratio of 9.1 to 1. Redline is around 6,000 RPM, but I felt the ideal shift interval was about 5,000 RPM, give or take some depending on which gear you're in. EPA fuel economy estimates for a GT in 1992 ranged between 15 miles per gallon in the city and 22 miles per gallon on the highway. Expect an average of 17 miles per gallon in mixed driving. Premium fuel is recommended. A 15.4 gallon tank was standard across the board. With the 1987 refresh, the Mustang gained an all-new interior. The doors, dash, console, and overall layout was radically different from their predecessors. Ford also focused on reducing cabin noise by adding new corrugated firewall panels and more sound deadening, making these the nicest Fox bodies to ever come out of Dearborn. I've never seen a Mustang of this vintage so well kept and preserved. With only 30,000 miles on the odometer, it's basically a time capsule. It's hard to talk about quality because so much has changed and improved over the years. Sure, there's a lot of hard plastics and some rough areas of fit and finish, but all of the necessary touch points are padded, including a large portion of the doors, dashboard, and the center armrest. The front seats on V8 models offered a lot more comfort and support than the base seats. In addition to the standard manual adjustments, there's adjustable side bolsters and even power lumbar. A 4-way power driver's seat was optional, as was leather upholstery. As I mentioned earlier, the position of the steering column is fixed. Fox bodies didn't receive airbags until 1990, but even then, it was only for the driver. Added safety is always a good thing, but the new corporate steering wheel took away from the otherwise clean and simple design of the 2-spoke wheel used in years prior. The comprehensive suite of gauges is a nice touch, everything you need and nothing you don't. The new dashboard boasted a more user-friendly layout by relocating the switches for the headlamps, emergency flashers, rear window defroster, and fog lamps to the instrument cluster. As far as storage, you have a generous amount between the large door pockets, center console, and glove box, not to mention the added versatility you get by opting for the hatchback. The only thing missing is cup holders. The dashboard can be used for temporary storage with its grooved flat top. The AC controls consist of 3 simple dials positioned above the radio. The Mustang GT came pretty well equipped, including but not limited to power windows, locks and mirrors, a 4-speaker audio system, cruise control, and illuminated visor mirrors. Major options shown on this example include a flip-up sunroof, a 6-speaker 60-watt audio system with a 4-channel amplifier, a 7-band graphic equalizer, and a rear window defroster. Now let's go ahead and see how she sounds. shut her down. Before we finish up the video, let's check out the back seat and then we'll head towards the rear of the car and check out trunk space. Climbing into the back seat is very straightforward. There's a little toggle lever that you pull up and tip the front seat backrest forward. Once you're in the back, you'll notice that it's not the biggest space, but if you're around 5.5 feet and shorter, you probably wouldn't have too much of a hard time sitting back there. The biggest rate limiting factors are headroom and legroom, but it's a pretty soft back seat. You have armrests and even a bit of storage in the side panels. Personally, I'm not much of a convertible person, so it's a really hard thing for me to decide which I like better, the hatchback or the coupe. On one hand, the hatchback is significantly more practical. You have 11 cubic feet of storage space just as it sits, but if you fold down the 50-50 split seat, you can load up cargo all the way to the front. This one also has an extra package that added a cargo net and a cargo privacy cover. With the coupe, you have a traditional trunk, so obviously a lot less cargo space, so it's a bit of a trade-off, but you do have less weight. So let me know in the comment section below which one's your favorite. Well everyone, I hope you enjoyed the in-depth look at this 1992 Ford Mustang GT. Be sure to stay tuned next time, leave a like and subscribe today. There's always a lot more where that came from. Take care everyone.